According to Section 314.15 of the National Electrical Code, fittings installed in wet locations must be listed for use in wet locations. The listing of these fittings is generally performed by independent testing and certification organizations. Some of the most recognized organizations include Underwriters Laboratories, also known as UL, the Canadian Standards Association, or CSA, and Intertek, also known as ETL. These organizations test and certify electrical products to ensure they meet specific safety standards. To find a list of approved fittings for wet or damp locations, you can visit the websites of these testing and certification organizations. For Underwriters Laboratories, you can visit Allprospector. Com. For the Canadian Standards Association, visit csagroup.org. And for Intertek, visit intertek.com. These websites often have databases where you can search for listed products. If you have a fitting and want to check if it's on a list or is listed, firstly, you can contact the testing and certification organization that listed the fitting to inquire about its status. Secondly, check the fittings label. The fitting should have a label that indicates it is listed for wet or damp locations. The label may include the name of the testing organization and the listing number. Thirdly, you can search online databases for listings of approved fittings. For example, you can search the Underwriters Laboratories Prospector database Allprospector. All. It is important to understand the difference between wet and damp locations. Fittings for wet locations must be able to withstand direct exposure to water, such as rain, snow, or condensation. Fittings for damp locations must be able to withstand moisture, such as humidity or condensation, but not direct exposure to water. Using the correct type of fitting for the location is crucial for ensuring safety and compliance with electrical codes. When examining the listing label on a fitting, look for specific markings that indicate its suitability for wet or damp locations. These markings often include abbreviations or symbols that correspond to the testing organization's standards. The Underwriters Laboratories, for example, uses specific phrases and symbols to denote wet location suitability. The Canadian Standards Association also has its own set of markings. Intertek similarly uses ETL-listed marks to indicate compliance. It is essential to familiarize yourself with these markings to accurately identify the appropriate fitting for your application. In addition to checking the listing label, it's helpful to consult the manufacturer's documentation for the fitting. The manufacturer's documentation often provides detailed information about the fitting's intended use, including whether it's suitable for wet or damp locations. The documentation may also include installation instructions and other important safety information. When searching online databases, be sure to use specific search terms that accurately describe the fitting you're looking for. For example, if you're looking for a fitting for a specific type of conduit, include the conduit type in your search query. This will help you narrow down the results and find the information you need more quickly. Always verify that the listing information you find online is current and accurate. Testing and certification organizations regularly update their listings as products are re-evaluated or new products are introduced. Make sure we are using the most up-to-date information to ensure compliance with the latest safety standards. If you're unsure whether a fitting is suitable for a particular location, it's always best to consult with a qualified electrician or electrical inspector. These professionals have the knowledge and experience to assess the specific conditions of the location and recommend the appropriate type of fitting. They can also help you interpret the listing information and ensure that the installation complies with all applicable codes and regulations. Remember that using the wrong type of fitting in a wet or damp location can create a serious safety hazard. Water can enter the fitting and cause electrical shorts, which can lead to fires or electric shocks. It's crucial to take the time to properly identify the location and select the appropriate fitting to prevent these hazards. The National Electrical Code, or NEC, provides detailed requirements for electrical installations in various types of locations, including wet and damp locations. Familiarize yourself with the relevant sections of the NEC to ensure compliance with these requirements. Section 314.15 which you mentioned, specifically addresses the requirements for boxes and fittings in wet locations. In addition to Section 314.15, other sections of the NEC may also be relevant to your installation. For example, Section 300.6 covers the protection of electrical equipment against corrosion, which is particularly important in wet and damp locations. Section 410 covers the requirements for luminaires, lamp holders, and lamps, including those installed in wet and damp locations. When selecting fittings for wet or damp locations, consider the materials they are made of. Fittings made of corrosion-resistant materials, such as stainless steel or PVC, are better suited for these environments. Avoid using fittings made of materials that can rust or corrode easily, as these can compromise the integrity of the electrical system. Pay attention to the design of the fitting as well. Fittings designed for wet locations typically have features that prevent water from entering, such as watertight seals and gaskets. Fittings designed for damp locations may have features that allow moisture to escape, preventing condensation from building up inside. When installing fittings in wet or damp locations, follow the manufacturer's instructions carefully. Proper installation is essential for ensuring that the fitting provides the intended level of protection. Use the correct tools and techniques to avoid damaging the fitting or compromising its watertightness. Regularly inspect fittings in wet or damp locations for signs of corrosion or damage. Replace any fittings that are showing signs of wear or deterioration to prevent electrical hazard. Keep in mind that even fittings that are listed for wet or damp locations may require periodic maintenance to ensure their continued performance. For example, seals and gaskets may need to be replaced over time to maintain their watertightness. When replacing fittings, always use fittings that are listed for the same type of location and have the same electrical rating. Using a fitting with a lower rating can create a safety hazard. If you're making any changes to an existing electrical installation in a wet or damp location, be sure to obtain the necessary permits and inspections. This will help ensure that the work is done safely and in compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. Working with electricity can be dangerous, especially in wet or damp environments. Always take the necessary precautions to protect yourself from electric shock. Wear appropriate personal protective equipment, such as rubber gloves and insulated footwear. Turn off the power to the circuit you're working on before starting any work. If you're not comfortable working with electricity, hire a qualified electrician to do the job. They have the training and experience to perform the work safely and correctly. Consider the specific environmental conditions of the location when selecting fittings. For example, if the location is subject to extreme temperatures or corrosive chemicals, it will need to select fittings that are designed to withstand these conditions. In coastal areas, where there's a high concentration of salt in the air, use fittings that are specifically designed for marine environment. These fittings are typically made of materials that are highly resistant to corrosion. In areas with heavy rainfall or snow, use fittings that are designed to prevent water from accumulating around electrical connections. These fittings may have features such as drip shields or weep holes. If the location is subject to vibration, use fittings that are designed to withstand vibration. These fittings may have features such as locking mechanisms or vibration dampening materials. When selecting fittings, consider the size and type of conduit or cable that will be used. Make sure the fitting is compatible with the conduit or cable to ensure a secure and watertight connection. Use the correct type of connectors and adapters to connect different types of conduit or cable. For example, use a liquid-tight connector to connect flexible metal conduit to a junction box in a wet location. When installing fittings, make sure they're properly supported and secured. Use appropriate mounting hardware to prevent the fittings from coming loose or shifting over time. If the fittings are installed in a concealed location, such as behind a wall or above a ceiling, make sure they are accessible for inspection and maintenance. Provide access panels or other means of access to allow for easy inspection and repair. When terminating wires and fittings, make sure the connections are tight and secure. Use the correct type of wire connectors for the application. For example, use insulated wire connectors in wet or damp locations to prevent corrosion. Avoid over-tightening the wire connectors, as this can damage the wires or the fitting. Regularly inspect the wiring and connections in wet or damp locations for signs of corrosion or damage. Replace any damaged wires or connectors to prevent electrical hazards. Consider using corrosion inhibitors to protect electrical connections in wet or damp locations. Corrosion inhibitors can help prevent rust and corrosion, extending the life of the electrical system. Apply the corrosion inhibitor according to the manufacturer's instructions. Keep in mind that corrosion inhibitors are not a substitute for proper installation and maintenance. They are simply an added layer of protection. When selecting fittings, consider the aesthetic appearance as well. Choose fittings that complement the surrounding environment and enhance the overall appearance of the installation. In some cases, you may need to use special fittings to meet specific aesthetic requirements. For example, you may need to use flush-mounted fittings in a finished wall or ceiling. When installing fittings in a visible location, take care to conceal the wiring and connections as much as possible. Use raceways or other means of concealment to create a clean and professional appearance. If you're working on a historic building, you may need to use special fittings that are designed to match the building's architectural style. Consult with a preservation expert to ensure that the fittings are appropriate for the building. When selecting fittings, consider the long-term cost of ownership. Choose fittings that are durable and require minimal maintenance. This will save you money in the long run by reducing the need for repairs and replacements. Compare the cost of different types of fittings before making a purchase. Consider not only the initial cost, but also the cost of installation and maintenance. Read reviews and ratings of different types of fittings before making a purchase. This can help you identify fittings that are known for their quality and reliability. Ask for recommendations from other electricians or electrical contractors. They can share their experiences with different types of fittings and recommend the best options for your application. Remember that safety is always the top priority when working with electricity. Take the time to properly select and install fittings for wet and damp locations to prevent electrical hazards and ensure the safety of yourself and others. If you have any questions or concerns, consult with a qualified electrician or electrical inspector.